We are going to go ahead and shift gears here a little bit away from our marketing topics and shift back to a topic near and dear to everyone's heart, and that is relationship. So we have our panel over here to my right that is going to present on close relationships in distance education with an exciting and special emphasis on emotional intelligence. So I'll let you guys take it away.
Thanks, Michelle. So we're going to start the talk today by discussing 3 different types of labor. We all know physical labor, we do it every day. We know cognitive labor, that's thinking. And sometimes, if you're thinking about deep, complicated things, it makes your brain hurt. The one that we don't talk about, though, ever, is emotional labor. And this is the sort of thing where if you... so we're coming up on Thanksgiving. For many of us, that means a wonderful time with family. And after some of our interactions, we feel that our soul hurts. And that's emotional labor. And so we're going to talk about some things related to how we understand emotional labor and how we strengthen ourselves and be better able to manage those emotions. So what is emotional intelligence? The term itself was coined in 1990 in a journal article in Imagination, Cognition, and Personality by Peter Salovey and John Mayer. Salovey was at Yale and Mayer was at UNH, just down the way from us. They defined emotional intelligence as a form of social intelligence that involves the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, to discriminate among them, and then to use this information to guide one's thinking and action. So in some ways, it's parallel to what we normally think of as regular old intelligence. In other ways, in a very important way, it's completely different. Regular cognitive intelligence we generally think of as innate. It doesn't really change. We learn how to use it more effectively, perhaps, but we can't really improve it. And that's a key difference between regular intelligence and emotional intelligence. So let's talk about emotional intelligence, how we might better understand it, and how we might start building some of those skills. We can think about emotional intelligence as sort of a 2x2 grid, a way of knowing certain things about yourself and others, and ways of doing things with your emotions for your own use, and also in building strong relationships. So we've got self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And in most of our emotional intelligence discussions, the concepts break down pretty similarly to that. There are some different ways of thinking about it, and we can actually constellate these 4 in some interesting ways. But for this presentation, because we only have a few minutes, we're not going to do that. But starting with self-awareness. Self-awareness is where all emotional intelligence starts, because if you don't know what's going on with yourself, how are you going to know what's going on with anyone else? The next piece of that is self-management. We all have that moment where we know we're feeling the emotions build, and you know you're going to say something you're going to regret. You know it, you feel it, it's coming, and then you do. And then you go, I knew I shouldn't have said that, right? That's a failure of self-management. That's where we're letting our emotions take over and really drive what we do. And there are some neurological ways that is built into our brains. So finding techniques to step in, to moderate those feelings, is an interesting process. Social awareness. You're in a room and you say something and suddenly everyone goes silent. And you go, oh, what did I say or do? As you're becoming aware of what others are feeling around you, you're using the process of social awareness. And then relationship management is a way of using emotions positively to build and strengthen relationships. So pretty simple and straightforward. In concept, we can understand this. Practicing it, though, is another story and is much more challenging. So to take us into some concrete examples of how we use emotional intelligence, we're going to start with Greg Andrews talking about how student support specialists practice emotional intelligence.
Yeah, so we'll move away from the concepts and talk practical application. So first and foremost, our role here as student support is really that relationship building aspect, right? So connecting our students to the university and the appropriate resources within the university, troubleshooting with them, whether it's course planning or if there's a struggle with a course or if they need to connect with the faculty, problem solving, emotional support. We talk relationships. It's not just, I'm a student and here's a classroom. There's so much more, especially with our students being so far away. And then, of course, advocacy. Anybody in the role that I'm in here has done at least 5 to 10 petitions where, we always put in a statement of support or something to help the student get to where they need to be. As we move forward, as you can see, I have an example of a school law student, and I'll explain why that's so significant in a short minute. And I'm going to use her situation to kind of exemplify how I've used some of these techniques, some of the 4 quadrants that Richard talked about. So first and foremost, this relationship we build, it's not just, here I am, I'll listen to you, I'll give you a course plan. That's academic advising. That's not student support. So student support is that first conversation, we call it the new student conversation, where we don't only talk about, do you have risk factors or are there certain issues that you might have? This is where we learn about their goals. What do they want to do? Where do they want to go once they finish? Whether it's somebody in the MPH program or somebody in our doctoral program who by the end of this I'm going to be calling doctor. So it's learning a little bit about their personal motivations for their professional goals. And the old higher ed adage of meet them where they're at, that's what we do. We'll talk to them over the phone, which is a primary source. For some of our students, it's easier with Skype to do video calls. So I've spoken to people in China, Morocco, Egypt. It's nice. It's like traveling the world from this office. And then there's text-based, and that could be email. I have one student who just happens to have my number because she knows me. I've texted her in the past. It really, it's what's most convenient for them. And if we look at it from an emotional point of view, some people have anxiety around talking on the phone or a video chat. So that meeting them where they're at is very, very important to the relationship building. And then interpersonal communication, it's not just, hey, how's your class going? Hey, how's this instructor going for you? Are you meshing well with the material? One example, so we'll go to the student in school law. For those of you who don't know, school law is arguably one of the hardest classes in our MSc or CAGS programs because it's taught in almost a different language. All of our students are used to being taught how to teach or how to do things like this. But that is taught in the form of, this is law, let's talk in legalese. And half of them lose their minds 4 weeks in because they've never had to do it. And that's what happened with the student. She called me and said, I don't think I can do this. I'm rethinking my entire life. And I said, well, give it 2 more weeks. And if in 2 more weeks you still can't get this, then I'll completely understand. But I promise you that 95% of our students, 6 weeks into this course, it's a 16-week course, they get it. It finally clicks, and then everything works out. Sure enough, that was the case. So she actually just graduated last term, so I'm proud of her. And so that's, if you look at utilization of university and college program knowledge, that's what I was able to do for her because I knew this course. I know the instructor, how stressful he can be because he's a lawyer. He's not so much a teacher. And so I was able to use that as well. But interpersonal communication isn't always just about UNE business. I have a student who is a teacher, and she hated the district she was in because it didn't give her enough opportunity to professionally develop. One day out of the blue, I'd already called her for the term, but it's not about meeting quotas, it's about taking care of your students. So I called her and said, hey, so-and-so, FERPA of course, how's the job search going? Have you had a chance to apply to the schools that you wanted? There's some pretty choice districts in Maine that people want to go to. So, and she actually had an interview in Yarmouth, and she called me back a week later and told me, hey, I got the job. And none of this had anything to do with UNE. And so sometimes it's important, especially with the relationship building, to focus on the fact that we have students, but we also have people and professionals within our programs. Got a lot going on over here. Buttons and paper. And so there's also another aspect. Richard touched upon this, self-awareness, understanding where you are. So a student may ask me a question that I've heard 1,000 times, and that does happen. You know, when does a course open, or when does this happen? For me, I've heard it 1,000 times. It's really easy to get so frustrated and be like, oh, I've answered this twice today. For them, it's the first question, or first time they've asked that question. So being able to kind of keep in mind and keep yourself centered as to, hey, I've heard this question 1 billion times, but he or she has never asked me that question before. And so recognizing that. There's also recognizing your available emotional state. So you may have just gotten off the phone with a student who is yelling at you for 1 billion things that you may not have anything to do with. But that's draining, right? So there's 2 sides of every phone call. And maybe you get another call right after. And if you're not ready to take that call and serve that student to the best of your ability, then you have to be aware of that. You have to be willing to say, I'm going to let it go to voicemail, I'm going to step out to lunch, and then I'll come back and I'll be refreshed and ready to go. Keeping in mind that how you perform for a student impacts that relationship as well. So asking, can I be there the way the student is going to need me? And if you can't, then let it breathe for a minute. And then what you have to say isn't always what needs to be heard, right? So I have heard many things where I'm like, oh, that's easy, this is what you got to do. But it doesn't mean that the person who's talking to you or venting to you is soliciting advice. Sometimes I just need an ear. And in the case of my school law student, that's all she wanted. She did want to know that it got better, and I told her that part. But outside of that, she just needed somebody to talk to. And it got to the point where a history was built up in every class. I got a second or third call, and it was, I don't know about this professor, but she knew she could rely on me to just listen. And so it's important to know what your role is in these situations as well. And then the last one for me is empathy. So empathy is so important when it comes to that emotional aspect. You have to be willing to be empathetic to students, because really you're the big connection in this role to the university. And so if you can't be empathetic, then they're not really a part of this institution, right? So you have to be able to actively listen. If you can't listen, you can't be empathetic because you have no idea what they said. On top of that, adding to the social awareness aspect, which we talked about as a quadrant, you have to be able to pay attention to cues and triggers that our students have. Like, some people are very proud about their intelligence and their ability to do things, and when they struggle in a class or they get a poor grade, you have to be willing to understand and know that, and that's part of that relationship building. The multiple times that you have spoken with them or interacted with them, you pick up on those cues so that in this situation you can say, it's not about your intelligence, it's not about your ability to work, it's just a minor tweak, and that's really important. And then of course displaying understanding. We do it all the time in face-to-face conversations, but being able to repeat back things, so I understand this, or so what you're saying is this, that is so important when it comes to being able to be empathetic and keep that relationship going. And then lastly, empathy is not giving somebody a solution. It's helping them find their solution. So being able to say, so I hear this, are you looking for this? And guiding them into their solution. Obviously, you're going to throw in some tidbits here and there, but that's a big part of relationship building, especially in my role as student support. So I'm going to hand it off now to Olga, who's going to talk about this exact same stuff with IDS and the relationships they build.
Thank you, Greg. Indeed, it will be a lot of the same strategies, same ideas, but in a very different role. So as instructional designers, let's see, there we go. We work a lot with faculty, and while we are not officially faculty support as such, we do provide that kind of relationship, and that we are in that sort of role informally. So oftentimes we are the anchor that connects our faculty who are remote to this college. We share the vision of the college, provide the knowledge of policies and procedures, expectations, what program knowledge to a certain extent, how that interacts with us. And we also have we as instructional designers have the background in technology. So all of this sort of puts us in a position where faculty are often very comfortable with our expertise in, say, technology tricks. And they are comfortable asking for advice or training in certain things. They're comfortable asking for help in resolving this sort of issues. And that allows us to be very comfortable in providing training as well. Our job is also being encouraging and sometimes inspiring to our faculty, because we definitely want them to do their best. We are genuinely work hard to resolve all sorts of issues that come up in the process of course development or maintaining a course or teaching, and that helps us win over the trust of faculty. So faculty that we work very closely with are subject matter experts, rather. Sometimes when we meet a person for the first time, we start building a course from the very beginning. And as faculty, it's sort of hard to come up to immediately trust a stranger, really. Sometimes that's where we are. It doesn't matter what our expertise is. It's hard to work out that visioning of a course. When you bring out your ideas, when you're vulnerable, when you are showing, when you're trying to do something new, and therefore it's extremely important for us to start building that relationship. It takes time, it takes multiple tries, but our side, so to speak, side activities such as training or some other, troubleshooting, those things help us promote that trust. And we share examples of how things may have gone elsewhere, how other faculty have resolved their problems or implemented certain activities, and that also helps build that relationship. Bouncing ideas, so that is fairly common. Again, this is something that we do, and it's important for us when we do this to not assume and ask questions, and that sometimes we jokingly refer to ourselves as forensic instructional design, the way we try to, find a problem and find a solution in the course, whose number we don't know, But that works with faculty as well, because the idea is to really find out what's going on, find out their concepts, find out their visions or ideas about a course. And just like Greg said, I would like to emphasize that repeating back what was said, sometimes voicing those assumptions, it sounds like this is what you're trying to do, and it's okay to be wrong, because that gives the other person that space to say, no, actually, this is what I mean, and then they can articulate themselves better that way. Another way that we work with faculty, we would ask, so how would we make sure that students know enough before they get into X? And again, that helps with that process. Or we can say, are you trying to X? And if that's incorrect, it's okay. Then you can just, oh yeah, now I see your point. So that interaction is really important. So we are going to talk a little bit about social awareness. And again, it goes back to, it starts with empathy, understanding what the other person's emotions are, where they're coming from. Organizational awareness, the ability to understand the politics within a certain organization and how they affect people. And finally, service, which is the ability to understand and meet the needs of clients, customers, people you work with. So with empathy, there we go. With empathy, there's the so-called tactical empathy or perspective taking. And that means that you are trying to understand what the person is coming from at this very moment, and so that you can lead them towards a better solution. In our job, since the faculty are remote, we often resort to email messaging. And it's possible to express empathy in a text message, not just in face-to-face communication. Except it is a skill. You have to practice, and it has to be very obvious that you are trying to express that. And another aspect that is a challenge in our practice is time. Any relationship consumes a lot of time, and there's also, Elizabeth was talking earlier today about CMC, computer-mediated communication, pointing out that going back and forth and using email is also time-consuming, so it's slow. And again, that's something that we need to allow for and build that into our schedules. And finally, we get to relationship management that from the perspective of, again, instructional design work in faculty. We want to both build relationships, but also have to carry forward the vision and the requirements for the course. We also want to make sure that the structure of the course meets our processes, such as that we apply backward design, and that process needs to be adopted in order to ensure course alignment. So by using and building these relationships, we can be so much more successful. And it really ensure very honest, very sincere collaboration between faculty and IDS. Okay, how much time do we have?
All right, so we had another thing that we're going to talk about, but to save some time for Q&A, and we do want to give you a time to practice this, we have a handout coming around. This is going to be exciting. You're going to love this. As the handout's coming around, find a partner. All right, what we're going to be looking at today is a really brief activity. We're going to explore different levels of listening. And this is a concept and a framework that I picked up from a tremendous leadership coach named Kate Ebner that I worked with in Washington, D.C. And she breaks listening down into 3 different levels. Level 1 is cocktail party chit-chat, right? You're talking to somebody, you're having a lovely time, you're sort of listening to what they say, you're nodding appropriately, mostly you're thinking about what's the next thing you're going to say. And that's okay, we all do this most of the time. Level 2 listening, on the other hand, is when we are really focused on the other person and we are trying to get as much information out of the other person as we can. We really want to know and understand what they're saying. In level 3 listening, which we're not going to experiment with today, it's almost as though the other person becomes your entire world. You are empathetic with that person. You are feeling what they're feeling. This is oftentimes used in therapeutic practice as well. But so, what you're going to do right now is practice level 1 listening. So, with your partner, we're going to take about 2 minutes, and you're going to have a brief conversation. This is what the conversation is going to be. Do you have any plans this weekend? That's it. So, go ahead, give it a shot. All right, 30 seconds left. And time. All right. Now, we're going to shift into level 2 listening. And we're not going to do both partners. So one of you needs to decide who's going to talk and who's going to listen. Now, for the talkers, we're going to give you the prompt. And for the listeners, focus on what they're saying. Are they leaving things out? Are there things you want to know? Are there connections that they're making that are real to them that you're not hearing explained? How can you better understand what's going on? So for this one, talkers, are you ready? What's your favorite vacation destination and why? Go. Yeah. 20 seconds left. All right, thank you. So, for the people who were talking, how did you feel in this exercise, especially at level 2? Wendy? Feeling heard, yes. Anyone else? All right, for the people listening, how did that feel? Fascinating. Anything else? What? Liberating. It is. It's amazingly liberating when you don't have to be thinking about the next witty thing you're going to say. It can also be a little tiring because level 2 listening and level 3 listening bring together both cognitive labor and emotional labor. You are emotionally invested and you're thinking. It's harder work than a lot of what we do. So with that, practice this. It's kind of fun. And see if don't try to go to level 3 with people you don't know. That just gets really creepy really fast. But try it out and see what you think. It's a powerful tool. So we have time, just a few minutes because we started late, for questions. Anyone, questions?
Not a question, just a comment that sometimes when you're having a casual conversation with somebody, like a cocktail party conversation, they might say something and you realize, wow, I really need to transition from the first stage into the second and really, go to the next level in a conscious way because of something they've shared that's meaningful, personal.
Absolutely.
Actually, I think I just heard it said, but and you kind of got at it, which is this is hierarchical in nature in that, like, as you go up in number, you are more invested. And I think that there's a kind of an understanding when you're going over it this quickly that, like, everyone starts at 1, but I'm wondering, are there people who sort of default a little higher or, on different levels? And the skill isn't just being able to engage level 2 or level 3, but also being able to scale it back. I mean, there's a skill a really important skill when you're dealing with lots and lots of people, students, faculty, colleagues, in being able to walk up and down this ladder, right?
Definitely. Do you guys want to chime in? I think that one of the interesting things for us is that you never know, as Tara mentioned, you never know when someone's going to say something and you're going to realize, oh, this isn't as serious as I thought it was. Okay, I need to say something witty now. Or, wow, that got deep really fast. Okay, all right, I can do this. And being able to make that shift is crucial in both of these roles.
And I just want to say that, first of all, what is very important is to practice it. While we all think it's very important, and it's very important to do it properly, we don't allow enough time to actually practice that. And if you do this intentionally, and if you catch yourself, this self-awareness is just, it builds up, and you are more in control of what you're saying, how you're saying it, when you're saying it. You become more comfortable with pauses. It's not just active listening, it's just plain listening, giving the other person the opportunity to express themselves and their problem. And then you also allow for the pauses to become more natural. And that sometimes it moves your agenda along, and we all do. We have our tasks, a whole list of them to complete with a certain person. And you just feel so much more in control as this progresses. And there's literature to read that if you'd like to learn a little bit more about this. But it's all good, good old-fashioned advice that how to win friends and influence people. So, and much later editions of other similar books. But that intentionality is very important.
And I think, too, going back to your question, Chris, there are definitely people, and I'm speaking from my role here, that come in with the level 3, listening, but also kind of that talking. And it's, hey, how are you? Welcome to the program. And they're like, hey, just so you know, I have 3 dogs and my life's a wreck and I'm getting divorced. And okay, whoa, let's learn about your goals first. But there are definitely people who start off at one of these levels. And so if we refer back to that quadrant, the 4 quadrants, being able to manage that relationship and understand where these people are coming from, because sometimes it is a life tragedy where it's like a volcano, they just need to get it out, or they're so intense because they're in one of these humanitarian fields, social work or higher ed or something like that, where this is something that they know, and they don't always think about these 3 levels. So it's important for you on your end to be aware and use that self-awareness, and then of course the relationship management, being able to identify what you need and what they need and find that balance.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You've been a great audience. Thank you for playing along.